Antwerp, who will raise the question of what is the meaning of art in a world of conflicts and extension. And I would also like to inform you that only panel members can ask questions, while other participants can submit questions via the chat link. Only that, Igor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, so we start not with my presentation, but just with a video. So just like to get in the mood, maybe somewhere. Okay, thank you for your attention. So, yeah, so I start right away my presentation then. And so I start with presenting myself a bit. So so maybe not everything about me, but only the interesting parts. So I have PhD in psycholinguistics, and I'm also an artist, and I try to combine these two backgrounds maybe together. So primarily I utilize painting and sculpture, and I focus on transformative qualities of these materials as a symbol of change of the humanity world. And sometimes I include also video, music, and performance to like add some layers on the narrative. And then in this way, each project is adapted to the story. So today, the presentation will be what is the meaning of art in a world of conflicts and extinction. So my idea is more to maybe to present this topic to ask for the feedback, for maybe some discussions in the comments, discussions in the panel, and maybe also discussions afterwards when the webinar is put on YouTube. So my maybe departing point of multiple points in the ideas that I believe that art is a mirror for reality, for humanity, for different situations. And I focus also on Friedrich Nietzsche's ideas in The Birth of Tragedy, who views the relationship between art and reality, emphasizing the transformative and life affirming potential of artistic expression. In Martin Heidegger ideas in The Origin of the Work of Art, I see that he sees the ideas and essence of art in its ability to reveal the truth about the world and also the human condition. So in my presentation, I will present historical examples, but I split it into like older historical, and I added a couple of more contemporary examples. Then, of course, I discuss my own examples, and then I will invite everyone for discussion. So in the historical perspectives, I start with two older, well, they are not on distant, on huge distance from each other, but we have also the ball painting in the from the Egyptian culture, and the Turner painting about Battle of Trafalgar, and most paintings in the past were focused on like rather propaganda and showing the winner's superiority. And here I want also to look with you closer to the Trafalgar battle, and here we see some people well in damaged situation, but it's very like distant painting, so not meant to fail for these people. Also at the same time, this painting is of course older than the Turner's painting, but at the same time there are also paintings showing death and the consequences of different illnesses, wars, and this example is from the Bruegel, and we see how he shows the dangers of different situations, but of course in their time it has clear religious meaning, showing that we have to think about the life after death, so that this is the most important part of the human existence. The first series of works, not one work, but series of works are that have really clear anti-war message in European art is from Jacques Callot, Miseries of War, mainly focused on the 30 years war and showing the brutality in its consequences. Here we can see it maybe a bit closer. And then also later, so like 200 years later, almost, Francisco de Goya makes also a series of sketches, Disaster of War, showing similar maybe ideas, but maybe because some situations are put up much closer, so it is much more confronting and disturbing. Also, close to this time, Vasily Vereshchagin paints the Apotheosis of War, the most famous painting of his, but he paints multiple works showing the destructive and dehumanizing nature of war, and also showing piles of skulls and bones and damaged ruins of the cities on the background. Also in European closer culture, so after First World War, we have the Kollwitz works showing very dark, in this case, survivors of war, but still confronted with the trauma after the war and the consequences of surviving, like that the people keep surviving even after the war. Also, Otto Dix in his works were also very confronting and very direct. And in this overview, we come closer to the to our times. Martha Rosler focused on the Vietnam War consequences, and her also series of works like photo montages and collages, showing that we are, in her case, people sitting in the United States are on like safe distance from Vietnam War, and they are just like looking at it as on the screen, computer screen. Also, the nice example of very contemporary person, so artist, performer, and fashion designer Venera Kazarova. She's presenting different performances showing the way she processes the tragic experience and the consequences of war. And now I want also to show my examples. So my first example, not probably chronologically, but thematically, I would put the 90s soup as the first one. The object on the left, I call also the Venus, also like comparing to the prehistorical objects. In this series of works, I explore the collective experience of the people of the post-Soviet time that reflects their confusion and instability, and also the search or quest, even I could say, looking for identity in challenging times. The other series of works, Unlived Stories, I focus on the constant change of life, and I take inspiration from different historical portraits, and it questions the existence of the different people faded away in our memories, but at the same time, it focuses also on the children who never got the chance to follow their dreams because of the traumatic situations. The last project that I'm working at, still ongoing project, unfortunately, inspired by the book of Susan Sontag regarding the pain of others, the same name of the book as well. So here Susan Sontag explores the war photography, similar also to the Martha Rosler idea that seeing pictures and photos in the newspapers, we just keep the distance and we cannot understand the pain, the real pain of the people confronted with it. In this project, I use oil paint to transform visually the photography and from the events from the Ukrainian war, and I start after 2022. I utilize also specific colors, more like so the colors that in my opinion have the like the source of the situation. It's Prussian blue and carmine red. The painting captures the conflict's essence, and analytical overpainting in this way abstracts the event and offers insight into how the non-involved individuals perceive the situations. So also I leave some parts of the works unpainted that show there are some places untouched by the situations, and with the infographics I add also the location, and in this way I create also the archive of the situation of the war. So with this all, I reached the end of my presentation, and I want also ask for your ideas. I'm extremely curious about where you see maybe connections between other works, other ideas. Also maybe because I'm mostly focused in my work on the explanational role and maybe partially educational role of art. So maybe you see it differently. And so I'm curious about your insights on my art and research. Also maybe interesting theoretical links. And also, people from not panel, I also invite for commenting and maybe asking questions in the chat.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes.
Yes. Okay, Evangelos. So now
yes,
you can take over.
Is there any question, please? Any observation, remark?
Maybe this one. Reality talks about reality. Anyway, yeah, you do it first.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Maybe first question then for Ihor would be, so with your own work, or for that matter, for the other pieces you showed leading up to your work. So, well, I'm sure there are many questions, but one would be, is your focus, it appears to be on the, let's say the reality, the consequences, the reality of war on the human body, the human psyche, the impact on many levels. So is there a relationship for you between that and, let's say, underlying issues in terms of causes of war? Like, I mean, you referred to Nietzsche at the very beginning. I mean, power, the idea of how, interpretations of historical imperative, power relations, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, yes. So, like you saw it correctly, that I see it. Oh, I'd like to try to research it on different levels. So, physical confrontation and psychological, and also I take the viewpoint or the part of the viewer or observer of the situation. So that's why it creates multiple levels. In the last project, probably there is no clear, source or the starting point of the conflict, but in certain way, probably in the 90s soup, there is this, turning point, the turning point that the 90s soup is also my childhood. So the time when I started also to ask questions. So that's why for me, probably the consequences that I observe nowadays started somewhere in the 90s. But probably, like, looking historically, they started much earlier. So who knows, maybe like researching it further, I can go to the real, not like personal, but general sources of the conflict. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Michael, do you want to continue?
Well, maybe just briefly, because it seems, just listening to your answer and thinking again about the trajectory of what you were shown, right, going back to ancient Egypt and sort of focusing especially on the Turner. So, these earlier representations would presumably all be ones that were commissioned by powerful entities and being used to, you use the word propaganda, to portray war as a wonderful thing, representing heroism, patriotism, valor, these sorts of values. And then subsequently, sort of a reversal where the focus seems to be more on the exploited, the powerless, the consequences. So do you see that as a clear, clean trajectory, or are we facing internal struggles within this in more modern and postmodern situations?
Well, yeah. So I gave examples of like earlier examples of this like patriotic and more propaganda-like paintings or works about war, but probably they are, well, not probably, like also in this time there are still, these awards, not particularly paintings, but maybe photography, posters. So they are still created in this way. So in the way to support people who has to believe that the war is maybe the right answer. Well, in my personal research, probably I don't see the connection with this side of the story. I'm thinking like why it is far or not like relevant. Yeah, well, it's a good question. So I have to think about it more. So like why I see it less interesting to research on it. Well, for me, like in the abstracted portraits, there is certain part of it, because certain portraits from the history I took, like famous personalities from the history, Soviet history, and I made abstracted portraits from it. So and probably for certain people, because they were not connected to it, so it's like happening like this. So they hear certain names from the history, but they don't mean much for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Professor Sadowski.
Thank you, Evangelos, and thank you even more so, Ihor, for the presentation of your work. I don't think I have any specific questions. For instance, why you paint or sculpt the way you do, because as an artist you have a freedom of expression, and you just do it the way you feel it should be done, and that's a part of art. It hasn't always been like that. A more academic, neoclassical understanding of art was that it should follow certain canons, certain rules, conventions, and an artist's talent or quality was measured by their adherence to those conventions. You don't have to follow that. And we live in a wonderful age of freedom of expression. Sometimes that freedom, originality, subjectivity can be bewildering or even confusing, but I don't think it is in your case. That's what I find, because you are reacting to the war in Ukraine, and you're using art as a way of supporting memory, your own our memory, collective memory. And that's actually the origin, one of the important origins of art at all, representational art, because our memory is not perfect. We can experience certain things, even tragic, dramatic things, like when the war in Ukraine started nearly 2 years ago. And I still remember the daily reports, the images of the bombings, destructions, especially of cities like Mariupol. And I was sitting and depressed, crying in front of the TV set, watching all this. But with time, and that's the danger, and that's probably the hope of perpetrators, that people will forget, the fatigue will kick in, and that a war, another war. We've had them in the past in history. So art steps in to create a record, permanent record. It doesn't have to be realistic. There are other media and art forms that do that, photography, film, or journalism, but art is more subjective, and you offer an individual, personal, emotional reaction. And what you record are not so much the military events, the destruction, the very facts on the ground, as your emotions. And the world should be grateful to people like you, because it isn't just the carnage we see on television screen and in the media. It's the emotion, it's the human dimension of it. And the images, especially yours, those historical paintings, are important in the sense of providing a context that war has often been the subject matter of figurative art. But your images, which I found very, very powerful, both the paintings, the two-dimensional images, are a limited palette of colors, but very strong, bright colors. Images that I found sort of half abstract, half representational, as if blurred, as if reflecting the mind in a state of a shock. And colors like blue, there was that wonderful blue painting, various tones of blue, which looked like a flat surface, but in a sense, there was a sense of depth, as if there was a space, a field, the plain that Ukraine is, with the blue sky above, which is why the upper half of the Ukrainian flag is blue. It's the sky, the expanse of the sky. And various shades of blue, from light blue to ultramarine. And it was mesmerizing. It was hypnotic. And just the last point I want to make, the sculpture, and especially the ceramics, which is, I think, an interesting material. I'm not a working artist. I do a little bit of photography, but that's all. But ceramic work is interesting. The material is hard, like stone, but we know it's fragile and brittle. So there is this ambivalence to the material itself, or like life, or like the houses in which we live. There is an English saying, safe as houses. Houses are not necessarily safe, as we saw from those drone photographs of Mariupol, just flattened, like the sea of rubble, which reminded us some European cities leveled by carpet bombing during the Second World War. So it's interesting. Hard, deceptively durable and stable, but at the same time brittle and fragile. So Ihor, thank you for your work and for keeping the public awareness in Europe, in the world, alive as to this ongoing, senseless, brutal, anachronistic war in Ukraine. Thank you. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is also a question in the chat from our colleague from Aristotle University, Lia Yoka. She asked, I would like to ask you about your techniques. How do you rely on the technical and representational conventions you use to carry across interpretations you have offered?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, also most of my works are paintings and ceramic sculptures. So so the paintings, I repaint, printed. So I print certain pictures, and then I prepare it for painting with oil, or sometimes I do some studies with acrylic, but I like to work with oil because it gives this it gives more possibilities, more time to work on the surface. So because acrylic dries much quicker. And with the ceramics, I use also different ideas. For example, with these sculptures that I presented with the pile of the sculptures. So I use molds. Sometimes in this case, for example, I used one shape and then I transform this shape multiple times to create multiple molds. So there is like one source object, but then there are multiple molds because the source object was also transformed while preparing the molds. So I hope I answered the question.
Yes, I think yes, but she continues with the second part of her question.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, and do you also feel your intervention will be more effective by joining forces with other artists? Organizing on a broader level can make art not only an expressive outlet, but also a weapon of social awareness, a weapon.
Well, anyway, yes. So I think anyway, like being present, being also exhibited somewhere and presented somewhere. It is the way to show the art to broader broader society, and then also probably working together with different artists. So probably also the idea of this smart semiotics art forum platform is also to connect with different artists, so to get the possibility to connect with different artists and also different researchers who connect also with art and connect different aspects. So and then so I think it will be an interesting step to show it to show it more, to connect also to different artists, so that there are multiple platforms to also, I don't know, to keep the social awareness. Not that there is no social awareness, but maybe to keep it alive.
Thank you. Thank you. Perhaps Eduardo Lamas would like to ask a question.
I would like, do you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
More than a question, I would like to do a comment on the last works of Ihor that make me think a lot about the disaster of the war by Goya, because he had personally a situation very close to yourself situation. Spain, his country, was invaded at the time by another country, a neighbor country, and this invasion also provoked a kind of conflict between Spaniards among them, and he felt a bit in the middle because there were some partisans of this invasion of the French that could have bring a political change in the country. So this war provoked also a conflict between citizens themselves, and he was in the middle of this conflict. And he also created this series as a way of making an archive of all the horrors he was seeing or getting information about. So it's an example of how art can be archive of for the future, and also aesthetic expression of a moment, even if the origin of this aesthetic is quite negative. And I was thinking of this link because it's also a series where you were presenting, and also you offer this connection to Goya, showing that you are aware with it. I found that interesting.
Thank you.
So was it thought about this work on Goya before, or you
Yes.
found this connection later?
Well, I was, at the moment when war started, so I was mostly working on like my personal identity before war started, but being like also in immigration and traveling, and also questioning myself as being or not being an artist. And so I was working on my identity before war started, and the moment when war started, of course, the questions were like, do I have, or do I want to do something with it as an artist? And first, because there were a lot of how to call it, the way people started actually to jump on this topic extremely fast without actually knowing the background of the situation. And that's why I kept the distance for a certain time, and only later I decided to find my way of the expression, because it kept like it stayed like in me, and then I wanted to express it. And then, of course, I looked for different examples in the history, how people, artists explored it and expressed it. And then one of the situations for me was one of the examples was Goya, and then so I'm aware, and I'm also reading his life book about his life. So the story, how he was connected to different situations. So so thank you for mentioning, and yes, so I'm aware about Goya.
Thank you very much. Any other colleague that would like to ask to Ihor?
Ihor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen other works from you more minimal or abstract. So I guess these works were done earlier, and now I see that your work is changing, or your style is changing. It's more visible in a way, whatever you want to express or what you want to express. How do you see that? Is that some style change because of the concept, or are you still working on, or is it a more an intuitive way of working, or is it something where you think that the work is more recognizable for a bigger group of people? Or that was my question.
Thank you for the question. Yes. Well, it's, if I would compare maybe my works now and the works of 15, 20 years ago, so probably the works there are well, like expressive, but in different ways. So, and then I think that because of the situation and topic, probably, so there is like different expressions. So the expression of 15, 20 years ago, it was more expression of different maybe feelings and experiences, like everyday experiences in life. However, the last time topics, it's more like traumatic experiences. And it's for sure, it changed for sure my style. And somewhere in between, probably I had also this more minimalistic style. Somewhere I see it as the point where I had to maybe calm down and like restart my focus. So because probably I can maybe call my own topic then, or my topics previously 15 years ago more superficial, so that it's more like it didn't go as deep as the topics I research nowadays. So and then so sometimes also when people ask what is my style, figurative or abstract, so it's sometimes difficult to answer, because sometimes I call it like abstracted. So the stuff I'm painting is not figurative, it's pretty abstract, but still in this abstracted areas you can recognize certain features, certain objects.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to mention, ask a couple of questions, if that's all right. Ihor, thank you very much for your presentation. And I think we're living in an era where artists maybe aren't as appreciated as much as they should be generally. So I always feel it's important as someone that shares poetry just to say thank you very much for being so open and vulnerable and sharing your work with an open forum. I mean, I've made a few notes on sort of, you know, touch points with sort of semiotic theory, people like Umberto Eco and the open work, and, you know, Lotman and his idea of creative memory and the text as holding memory and for the future, as I think it's already been alluded to. But yeah, for some reason, the thing that the person that came to mind was Leo Tolstoy and his idea of sincerity in art. And there's a quote that I have from his book, from his essay, What is Art, from 1899, where he says, art is a human activity consisting in this, that one man consciously, by means of certain external signs, hands on to others feelings he has lived through, and that other people are infected by these feelings and also experience them. And I guess as was his style, quite didactic in terms of his breakdown. He says, and the degree of the infectiousness of art depends on three conditions. One, on the greater or lesser individuality of the feeling transmitted. Two, on the greater or lesser clearness with which the feeling is transmitted. And three, on the sincerity of the artist, i.e., on the greater or lesser force with which the artist himself feels the emotion he transmits. And he says, I've mentioned three conditions of contagiousness in art, but they may all be summed up into one, the last, sincerity, i.e., that the artist should be impelled by an inner need to express his feeling. I mean, it goes on, but I won't continue. But no, I felt for me, I was going to ask you a couple of questions. One was about the sort of feelings that you can recall. I know it's difficult to recall what you were going through before the ideas came to you, and art is a very iterative process. But just in general terms, like the feelings that have gone into the art, and also just I had a question about the music, because I felt the first piece where you had the upturned pipes, which, you know, I'm reading as this is a voice of anguish coming from the pipes in some way, and the music felt like a requiem to me. It felt like a, you know, a choral work. You know, it reminded me of, I don't know, sort of Verdi Requiem, or aspects of Requiem masses, maybe something slightly less traditional than Mozart, but kind of Requiem mass. So I wondered, so two questions, one just general on the emotions, and then also the music and the choice of music, and how significant was that?
Well, yeah, so the music was extremely well, yeah. So we started actually with different piece of music of the same composer, but for me, and it's also sort of dramatic and with women singing, but it was well, yeah, because it's Russian composer with yeah, a woman singing in Russian. So, and because I understand what is she singing about, and it was more about troubles in love and stuff. So I thought that, okay, it's also probably dramatic for her, but, and yeah, multiple people also experience these situations in life. So it's not like only her individual situation. So but I thought that in my case, there is something different I have to find. So that's why I was searching for different musical piece. So it's from the same composer, and but more war related originally, because it's also about Alexander Nevsky piece, and it's one of the pieces that I felt more, the best possible connected with the ideas I want to express with my art. So.
Okay.
You?
And so sorry, just that. Thank you very much for that, for the answer. Anything about sort of your general kind of? I'm just curious as to kind of. Obviously, you've shared a little bit about the backgrounds, but do you see different emotions in different works, or are they all motivated by the same overall kind of emotional world?
Well, yeah. So I think in situations like this, people get different emotions, and then it can vary from I don't know, anger till desperation and sadness. So so how to I try to I try to work also in the way that while I'm working, I don't think what to change. So I try to to decide about the concept before I start to paint, and then before starting to paint, I try to I can call it analyze my own emotions, my reactions on certain situations, photos, and then also looking how other artists work on it, and how what from what I saw, what I felt works the best for me. So, and then I start working, and then then I make not really poses, but when the certain series of works is finished, then I stop again, and then I think about next step. So that not that I presented also these are at least 3 different projects, and anyway, so for each project I had to stop to think okay, what did I create already, what do I need to create? And sometimes I say so that I try to combine, because some artists are scared of expressing their own emotions, so maybe to be psychotherapeutical for themselves. So I think in this case it's impossible to exclude it. So it's still my own also trauma as well that I include in every piece.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Okay, well, just thinking about some of what's been said, all very interesting, and starting to make me wonder about how some of these different ideas might come together. So, I mean, for one thing, let's say if we look at some of the work that you were showing, I don't want to make too big of a generalization, but let's say Kahlo and Goya and Kollwitz, 3. I mean, they worked in other media, but I mean, the examples were the graphic arts, right? Printed pieces that can be distributed, right? And also Otto Dix. It was a painting you showed, but his graphic series, Der Krieg, was similarly very powerful. So those are examples that were meant, to be published, to be printed, whether distributed. We live in a time where we're awash in images, and it seems to me information overload is one of the major issues, perhaps contributing to multiple crises. We're just so awash in images, and although some of us may try to consume some of them or deal with some of them deeply, there's a tendency to pass through them very, very quickly. And there was some discussion about exhibiting work and about the very personal, let's say, nature of your work, the emotional nature, the personal interpretation. It seems to me that your work really, I mean, we can get something out of it from looking at our computer screens, but really is the kind of work that personal connection to it, actually getting to see it. Karina and I are lucky enough that we have gotten to see your work, in the round or, personally. And it seems maybe that becomes part of the nature of the work too, that it's it should be exhibited. It should be seen and encountered not merely as a flat image, but as a physical object where interpretation, emotional response, and time for contemplation is part of that. I mean, photography is very powerful, but again, we're so much confronted with photography, and you were mentioning Susan Sontag's ideas about how it can represent for us what's happening in one way, and yet at a distance that's an important issue. So, yeah, it does seem to me that exhibition, whether personal or in some sort of group collective situation, or both, it doesn't have to be one or the other, that the work really needs that to communicate.
Yes, yeah. So, well, yeah, I'm working on it because, yeah, there are also multiple steps on getting somewhere. So anyway, yeah, like to present it to certain groups or galleries. So asks like, yeah, maybe clear portfolio. So, yeah, well, like today it was also like a part of the portfolio presented. So, yeah, so I'm working on it. And I think, yeah, well, it's also, there is like certain urge to show it like this year and not wait to maybe 5 more years to show it. However, I hope that people can still relate to it and keep in mind that, I mean, unfortunately, people tend to forget, like Piotr said as well, so that it's only 2 years and we feel much easier about the war after 2 years only.
Thank you.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. So if you have some ideas, you can always share with me so we can find the way to show it somewhere.
Any other colleague that would like to ask to comment?
I would like to make some remarks.
Professor Rector, yes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your presentation. And I think that without words, you really touched us psychologically. You know, at least I felt a lot of anguish and sorrow and even fear. And I think what you presented can have different interpretations, like the screen with the different tones of blue. For me, it was different levels of sadness that you were showing there. So I think your work can be interpreted in different levels and in different ways. And I want to ask you a practical question. Have you made an exhibition of your work, or do galleries or museums accept this kind of work, or how do they react to it? Or even on a personal level, are you able to sell it individually? So that's a practical question.
Well, at this particular moment, I was not really selling it yet, so I was more working on anyway, like 3, like I say, also before war, and the first half a year of war. So I was more like looking for my artistic expression, like who am I and how am I as an artist? So what is my medium? What feels for me better? Because sometimes it's also difficult. Yeah, nowadays, like there is access to any material, to any medium. So everything what you don't know, you can learn easily. You just need to find where. And that's why it's difficult, because I can express myself in different ways, like from photography to painting. And then I was researching like what is my way of expression. And So while creating, I was not really thinking, is it sellable or not? So because I think it's also maybe not a good, not a good like part of the artist. I mean, okay, an artist has to exist and has to have some food and stuff and live maybe comfortable enough. But then I think in this case, probably the commercial part would kill the feeling in the creation. So that's why I was more like researching and creating and exploring the way of expressing it first. And that's why, like I said to Michael as well, so it's only now that I go for, I search for the places I can show it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Ihor.
Hello.
I was really impressed by your work. Thanks so much for the presentation, especially by the sculptures at the beginning. I was intrigued that, that I'm interested in taste about the soup of the 90s. The title has any connection to
your work, yeah.
Taste and how I was intrigued also about the configurations. I think you called a Venus, no? Like a Venus shape. Why did you choose that?
Well, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I wanted to save some time while my presentation. So not that I particularly chose the shape. So the idea of the performance is, so I took the, I think in worldwide, you call it Fimo-clay. So it's the sort of plasticine that you can bake in the home oven. So I created, well, for me, it was also like 90s, like I said, also the childhood. And I was playing with plasticine a lot. And so that's why, so the first step that I did, so I created different shapes, like also the symbols of Soviet Union and different shapes. And then so I pretend cooking the soup, cutting these symbols in pieces. So then I put it in the water, and at the end I like chew it. So this like mix of this plasticine, and like while chewing, so I create this shape. So the Venus shape is the final product of chewing the pieces of the different parts, different symbols. So like I said, also this is like the research of the background and identity, like what created what, who created me. So like why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking now. Yeah. So, but I understand your
Yes.
maybe interesting soup, because you try also to use multimodality and present food and music and different stuff together.
Yes, I think in Argentina in the past century we had only one war, the Malvinas War, maybe the English called Falkland, no? We call the Malvinas. And there was a piece, I don't remember the artist, but he drew some material and he drew the material in the shape of the island. So it reminds me a little bit of that, no? Your performance.
Okay.
I will try to find the name.
Yeah. Okay, find it and send it to me, please. So
yes.
Yeah, and yeah, in my case, Venus, it's but the name came after the creation. So well, yeah, sometimes I do it. Well, so in this case, so the shape I got because well, actually the prehistorical piece is also not, the person who created it never called it Venus. So it was like only called by the researchers afterwards. So the person who found it probably also didn't call it Venus.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you very
for the
much.
question.
Ihor, can I ask you something?
Of course.
Me too. I liked very much the first work of art. I liked this way of the visualization of the notion of screaming, of the voice. In translation studies, especially in the semiotic studies, a lot of colleagues suppose the idea that the work of art, the artist is a kind of translator, of mediator. Other colleagues said no, it's much more than a mediator, a translator of the reality. It is a real translator because he adds, the artist adds his own view about the reality, as translator also does. Do you share this view, this position?
Yeah, for me it's difficult maybe to maybe comment. Well, not difficult. I can comment on it, but I mean, because one of my also educational backgrounds is also to be a translator, like linguistic translator. So I studied languages as well. So then, it's maybe it's the way I am. So the way I also use languages, and I try to maybe express. So, and well, it's a good question. Maybe that's why I didn't end up in translating, because for me it was always that the words in different language are different. So it's difficult to translate from one language to another, because we have words that close enough, but if you look more specific on certain words, you understand that it has slightly different feeling. And that's why probably I went more to the art, translation then, because I think art can be more individual, because like I said also in my last project, the blue, the Prussian blue and carmine red, it's also like my interpretation of it. So because I see the Prussian blue is sort of the source color of all the military, not the all military activities, but at least the First and Second World War being sourced in German area, that have also the consequences on today's war. And then carmine red is for me probably the association with Soviet symbolism. So, but for someone else, probably exactly the same colors can mean something different. And that's why, so I like also the art, the shapes, the colors are pretty individual. However, so I didn't grow up on the island or somewhere. So then, of course, the society influenced me as well. So the way the majority of people around me experience also or feel about blue and red and different shapes also shaped my way of translating my feelings to the visual stuff.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last question, perhaps, Professor Yoka?
Yes, I'd love to, but it would be a follow-up on my previous written one.
Of course.
Thanks so much for the presentation, and thank you all for the fantastic comments. I think there's a lot to think about there also for the artist. It's so Mr. Ihor Biloushchenko, let's try to systematize all this, like this whole discussion. You've posed a question at the beginning of this webinar. What is the meaning of art at a time of conflict and war and all that? So I get the sense, and I want your reaction to this, that you are trying to work on several levels of meaning. Okay, one is a level that we cannot entirely control. That is the level of the status of art today. And I might have a slight disagreement here with you. I think that since at least 9/11, art, like commercial art, today's art after contemporary art, let's say, has become increasingly politicized. I mean, it thematizes politics more. In that sense, it's politicized. There's much more specific artistic bureaucracy, but there's also a lot of censorship. Especially in the last few years, in several of the 300 plus biennials, but also at the Castle Documenta, there are specific, like post-production censorship, like works that are being shown and then they're being condemned, and then the artist apologizes and removes the work. Things that are new to the censorship regimes, I think. Before, there were controversies, but the artist and the curator held by their stance. They like insisted that what they had decided was definitely their final choice. Now, this is the level of the status of artworks, which is very hard, I think, to change, because it to have an effect upon. But I think you're interested in that, since you call yourself a science-based artist. So you play with larger regimes of representation, not just art. Another example would be how, for example, cultural heritage is being devalued right now, like a very important aspect of cultural meaning changes status today. And international, global cultural heritage is being bombarded, but of course that's much less important than lives being taken. So immediately the status drops. So a second level, that's what we've been talking about, is the function of art and the effect we can have. That is why I asked you what kind of artists you like to exhibit with, in what kind of collections do you want to see yourself, what exhibitionary and collection contexts are work best for you. Again, you call yourself a science-based artist. I love the fact that on your website you have the same series of works, for example, Unlived Stories, but also Biomorph, under both sculpture and painting, right? So you play with the categories very much. I find that very interesting. So you attach your own meaning to your work, but that's not always easy to come across, right? You have to arm this with words. You have to arm this with other artists you like to be exhibiting with. You organize things with other people, and that feeds into what we recognize as your identity as an international artist, right? So where's the politics in that? And especially, where are your references? Found the presentation fabulous and really moving as well. And I heard Piotr Sadowski's words very, very carefully. Where's your reference to conflicts and war in that context? I mean, on the level of meaning that has to do with exhibitions, collections, your initiatives to attach words and interpretations to your to your works? Because you obviously work a lot with the history of art, with the conventions of representation, of course, because you are a professional. But beyond that, you know, you also carve your own niche within the market, and that is also a political stance. And the third level, the final level, and that also has to do with the fact that you also studied psycholinguistics. That was very impressive. Art, of course, the meaning of art is also the creation of a kind of surplus, the creation of new languages, of new pathways of feelings and of thoughts. I heard the question by Chris Arning is the name. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's exactly something that, again, we cannot control, but it's the plus that the artistic category has always offered, even before its conception 500 years ago as a commercial category, as art for its own sake. So the poetic surplus. So what's the politics in that then? So that's what I'm asking. If you agree with this tripartite, let's say, categorization of meaning in the arts today, from the more personal to the more broadly cultural, and secondly, if you call yourself a political artist or just a person who is concerned with being, I don't know, a citizen in Europe, worried about what is happening, because it's, I think, two different things, isn't it? Yeah, or isn't it? I don't know.
Well, yeah. So
thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Like, it's very interesting insight. Anyway, anyway, there was like a discussion with some colleagues about so what topics you are allowed to work being an artist. So like in what case I'm allowed to work on the, well, in my case, I'm like, so there is no problem on working on the situation in Ukraine, having Ukrainian background, but probably politically, I see it somewhere difficult, because sometimes I have problems with someone calling me Ukrainian artist, because I have double backgrounds, mixed backgrounds, Russian and Ukrainian. And and in this way, probably it pushes me to look at the problem on distance. So being maybe independent, uninvolved in any of the, well, at least two parts in this conflict. So partially it helps, so to work on it, so I can take, make some distance and take some distance from the situation. At the same time, it would be probably much easier to connect with pro-Ukrainian artists or Ukrainian-based artists, and maybe work with them, presenting my work. But I think then, like, so it's also like the problem of the conflict regions in Ukraine, that they are not Ukrainian enough for Ukrainians and not Russian enough for Russians. So that's where I feel myself. So I'm not like pro-Ukrainian with my art for pro-Ukrainian artists, but I'm completely not pro-Russian in my art. And so in this way, well, my art is clearly politically linked, but I try to research rather the psychological part of it. So where you can actually generalize the situations, the problems to any person involved in conflict situations. So in this way, so my my works, my series of works are based on the situations in Ukraine and Russia, but at the same time, the same feelings are probably experienced also by people involved in different conflicts, happening in the world right now as well. So if you would, if you ask what places, what artists, so I don't have probably particular names. So maybe thanks to this webinar, I can find more connections. So, but I can say that like the meaning is important. So the gallery that is working with the meaning behind the work is more important for me than the gallery that is working more on commercial part of the art. Also, the artists, well, depends of course on the exhibition, but probably if they want to have the like group exhibition close to each other, so probably the psychological part and psychological experiences would be would be the artists who are interesting being connected with. Did I forget something else? No. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Any other comment? No? So we can close this session. Okay, I would like to thank all of you for the participation in this session, and I hope to have the chance to meet each other in another event of Smart Semiotics. Thank you very much for your presence here.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ihor, for the presentation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ihor.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.